May 2021, a ransom note appears on screens across Colonial Pipeline's network. 5,500 miles of pipeline, frozen. Millions of gallons trapped in place. No explosion, no broken valve, no physical attack. Just one message: pay up, or America runs dry. And within 48 hours, it does. Gas stations from Florida to Virginia run empty. Lines stretch for miles. People panic, filling every container they can before there's nothing left. America doesn't run on Wi-Fi. It runs on fuel, and someone just proved they could shut it all down. The largest cyber attack on energy infrastructure in U.S. history. Who did it? And how did they shut down America's biggest fuel pipeline? Colonial Pipeline moved 45% of the East Coast fuel supply. 5,500 miles of steel carrying gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel from Texas to New York. A hidden energy superhighway beneath the country's feet. It fed airports. It fed trucking fleets. It fed cities. Every commute, every grocery delivery, every ambulance run. All powered by fuel that most people never even think about. But Colonial wasn't just pipes and valves. It was computers, servers, networks. A digital nervous system coordinating pressure, flow, scheduling, billing. Every drop accounted for by code. If that code stopped working, everything stopped. Colonial believed they were protected. Firewalls in place, antivirus installed, cybersecurity best practices on paper. But infrastructure companies don't operate like tech companies. Systems stay online for decades. Accounts remain active long after people leave. Old tools keep running because shutting them down is too risky or too expensive. And somewhere, buried deep within that complexity, was one old account. One password no one remembered, still active, still trusted. One digital skeleton key to the most important fuel pipeline in America, and someone found it. It didn't start with chaos. It started with a login, a username, a password, and a remote connection that still worked, even though no one had used it in ages. Colonial Pipeline had an old VPN account, a digital key, still active inside their system. No multi-factor authentication, no warning when someone tried to use it. DarkSide found that key. Maybe they bought it off a dark web marketplace. Maybe it leaked years earlier in some forgotten data breach. Maybe a Colonial employee reused the same password somewhere else and it was stolen there. It didn't matter where it came from. What mattered was that it worked. One click, one login, and the door opened. They didn't need to break in, they signed in. Once inside, they didn't make noise. They didn't break anything. They watched, they learned. They explored systems that were never meant to be exposed to the outside world. They mapped Colonial's digital nervous system, the servers that handled scheduling, billing, and communications. They found files that didn't just describe the business, they were the business, and they quietly copied them. Contracts, credentials, company secrets. Nearly 100 gigabytes of valuable internal data exfiltrated out of the network without tripping a single alarm. Then they escalated their privileges. More access, more control. The pipeline wasn't breached through pipes or valves. It was breached through trust. Colonial's computers saw DarkSide as just another user with the right password in the right place at the wrong time. Then, when they had mapped enough of the network, and when Colonial would be slowest to respond, they pulled the trigger. A command executed, malware detonated, screens froze, files locked, critical business systems encrypted in an instant. Across offices and control centers, computers went dark and a black and white ransom note appeared. Your network is encrypted. We have your data. Pay the ransom to restore access. No sabotage, no vandalism, just control. Colonial's engineers scrambled to isolate the infected systems, ripping network cables from walls, shutting down servers, trying anything to stop the spread. They weren't just fighting code, they were fighting time, because every disconnected computer meant another piece of Colonial's operation falling offline. The malware never touched the pumps or the pipeline's physical controls. DarkSide didn't need to break the machinery, they broke the business, without the ability to track orders, measure deliveries, or bill customers. The pipeline could not operate. Fuel might be in the pipe, but it had nowhere to go. Colonial had no choice. To protect their infrastructure, they shut everything down. A 5,500-mile pipeline silenced by a password and a plan. DarkSide wasn't trying to make a point. They weren't trying to send a message. They were here to get paid. And now, they had leverage worth billions. Colonial expected disruption. They didn't expect a crisis. Within hours of shutting the pipeline down, fuel stops across the southeast watched their supplies run dry. Stations began placing plastic covers over pump handles. People drove from town to town, searching for gas. Lines wrapped around blocks. Engines idled as frustration boiled. Screenshots went viral. Out of fuel. Limit 10 gallons. No gas until further notice. And fear, the kind that spreads faster than truth, took control. Drivers who normally filled half a tank now filled to the brim. People who had never stored gasoline in their lives brought jugs, cans, anything, just to have something tomorrow. Demand didn't just increase, it exploded. Airports felt the shock next. With jet fuel deliveries paused, flights were rescheduled or rerouted. Pilots were told to carry more fuel so they wouldn't have to refill on the East Coast. Companies raced to secure diesel for delivery trucks that kept grocery stores alive. Hospitals evaluated their reserve supply for emergency generators. Every industry touched the pipeline, and every industry braced for impact. Inside Colonial's command center, the tone shifted from urgent to desperate. Every hour fuel wasn't moving meant another wave of panic outside. Economists warned, if the shutdown continued much longer, the shock would hit food, medicine, and critical manufacturing within days. It wasn't just about cars anymore, it was about everything. The US government stepped in. The FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Energy, all connected to Colonial over emergency lines, confirming what everyone already knew. This was no longer Colonial's problem. This was America's problem. Analysts worked through the night trying to determine the reach of the malware and the integrity of operational systems. Could the ransomware spread into pump controls, pressure valves, pipeline monitoring equipment? No one knew. And that uncertainty was terrifying. Infected systems were isolated, backups examined, every possibility evaluated. And all the while, ransomware remained locked in place, like a ticking bomb inside the network. DarkSide never needed to touch the machinery to take the pipeline down. Their leverage came from something far more powerful: Colonial's fear of what might happen next. The situation was simple to describe, but impossible to ignore. Fuel was ready to flow. America was waiting. But without computers, nothing could move. Every new headline, every angry crowd, every gas shortage pushed Colonial closer to a choice no one wanted to make: negotiate, or lose even more. The pipeline wasn't the only thing being squeezed, so was time. DarkSide didn't need to send threats. They didn't need countdown timers or dramatic demands. The situation outside was doing their work for them. People were angry, businesses were losing money, the nation was getting impatient, and DarkSide watched it all unfold from behind screens half a world away. Inside Colonial, executives stared at a decision that could define their company forever: rebuild everything from scratch and keep the fuel offline for days, maybe weeks, or pay criminals and hope the key they sent actually worked. There was no guarantee, no rulebook, no help coming in time. The FBI advised them not to pay. Cybersecurity teams warned the attackers might leave backdoors behind. Federal agencies feared it would set a precedent, a green light for the next attack. But every minute the pipeline wasn't running meant the crisis outside grew louder. Colonial wasn't negotiating from a position of power. They were negotiating from the edge of collapse. So, behind closed doors, on encrypted channels monitored by investigators, the bargaining began. DarkSide wanted 75 Bitcoin, roughly $4.4 million at the time. For a hacker group, a fortune. For a pipeline fueling half the East Coast, a necessary evil. Colonial paid. No press conference, no announcement, just a silent transfer from a critical infrastructure operator to a criminal wallet. Moments later, DarkSide delivered what they promised, a decryption tool. But reality doesn't care about promises. The tool worked, just painfully slow, clunky, inefficient, barely usable. Colonial's engineers quickly realized the ransom had bought them time, not salvation. They still had to rely on their own backups and painstaking recovery work to bring systems back online. And while they scrambled to restore operations, the FBI followed the money. Cryptocurrency may be anonymous, but blockchains keep receipts. The investigation traced the ransom through a web of laundering services and seized digital wallets, recovering nearly half of the money. A rare victory. A message to attackers. America doesn't just pay, it hunts. But DarkSide didn't stick around to see the full response. As federal agencies closed in and Russian authorities denied involvement, DarkSide vanished. Websites shut down, servers wiped, accounts emptied. Gone, like a ghost that made millions and slipped back into the shadows. Colonial Pipeline started to come back online. Not because the crisis was over, but because the hackers had already won what they came for. A cybercrime group had just proven they could exploit critical infrastructure for a payday, and the world was watching. Fuel started flowing again. Gas lines shortened. Flights resumed. America exhaled. But the panic didn't disappear just because the pumps were running. Colonial Pipeline had just shown the world how fragile everything truly is. Because this wasn't a foreign military attack. This wasn't sabotage from inside. This wasn't a spy operation gone wrong. This was a criminal business deal that brought a nation to its knees. Suddenly, cybersecurity wasn't just a line item in a budget. It was national defense. Government officials launched investigations. Emergency directives rolled out. Pipeline companies were ordered, by law, to report cyber threats, tighten access, and protect their digital controls like the physical infrastructure they operated. For the first time in U.S. history, pipelines were forced to prove their cybersecurity was strong enough to keep the country running. Executives across every industry asked a question they never wanted to face. If ransomware can shut down fuel, what stops it from shutting down food, water, electricity, hospitals, power companies, shipping terminals? All quietly reevaluated their defenses because Colonial Pipeline was a warning shot. DarkSide was gone, their servers erased, their brand dissolved, but the business model they perfected didn't die with them. New groups surfaced, new ransom notes appeared, new victims woke up locked out of their own systems. Ransomware became an industry, and somewhere out there, behind layers of anonymity, more attackers wait. Watching, scanning, testing every login that was never disabled, every password reused, every digital door that someone forgot to close. The Colonial Pipeline attack didn't show us how strong hackers are. It showed us how much we have to lose. Because if a handful of criminals can stop the world's most powerful country from moving, what happens when the next group decides they don't want money? They want control?